Hey, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 347, being recorded on April 29th, 2015. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
I always really appreciate Josh's enunciation during the intro part.
And enthusiasm.
It quickly falters throughout the show, like it eventually is gone.
Yep.
But you got to start out at least high so that when you get down to the mid-range, it's not totally awful. So welcome back, everyone. I assume everybody, we took 2 weeks off the podcast, right? You guys surely didn't record anything
Yes.
while I was gone.
We did.
You
That's
made
what we'll
people
admit to.
You made people
cry.
listen to that?
We made people cry.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
We're like high school bullies.
So I apologize for being gone. 2 weeks ago, I was on a family trip playing golf in Hilton Head. It was cold and rainy the last half of it, but, you know, whatever, I was gone. And then last week, I was in London.
Learning stuff.
And I was at my hotel room when you guys recorded the podcast, but apparently it's 3 a.m.
Oh.
when I record the podcast.
So big shout out to our
podcast.
listeners in the UK who stay up that stinking late.
No joke.
Yeah.
Hopefully there are none of you. We'll check the statistics
There's
later.
There are.
There won't be
There
any
are a
now that
couple.
they know that you just slept through it.
Oh, hell yeah, I did. Because I slept through meetings on the first day, so I felt like not doing that again.
That's true.
In any event, so we're back. I don't think we have anything super exciting out of the world on this podcast this week. We're going to talk about...
I mean, nothing super crazy.
Well, actually, I take that back. We're going to talk about next generation AMD CPUs eventually, too.
This podcast
That
is
we have-
Josh Tech.
That we have some information on.
But we already had 2 weeks of, like, Josh Tech, right?
No.
Not really?
No, not really.
Josh wrote the most content this week.
Wow.
Well, that's a first.
Make sure it never happens again.
Well, I do kind of want to get paid for this month.
That's
so I
true.
cram it in
That's true.
all at the back.
We're getting close to the end of April where checks would come out. I'm like, oh, I don't know about this one.
I wasn't very active in the writing. Holy shit, it's the last week.
Word count of 6. So, and that's hip chat comments. All right. So here you go. We record the show on Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, 3 a.m. UK time. Now I know. Is that,
Now that you
is that
know.
GMT? No, I don't think so.
No,
I think
I
it's
don't-
like,
No.
I think it uses the word London in it.
Yeah. It's not GMT.
GMT is one more
It's a few-
east.
it's-
Is it just one more?
It's like,
cut-
it's over.
Is that
yeah.
country big enough to have 2 time zones?
No. But I
No.
just think they just call it London because the rest of the country doesn't matter.
But Greenwich is in England.
Is it?
Yes.
I was thinking it was
Lord,
further east.
people.
It's
I thought
Greenwich
it was
Mean
in-
Time.
It's a stinking
So does it have 2
observatory
time
in the
zones?
south of England.
I don't.
Because it's definitely not called GMT.
Are you thinking UTC?
Nope. I might be, but they don't call it GMT over there. I don't know. In any event, it's 3 a.m. there-ish.
No,
Oh,
it's TFT. The fucking time.
What?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, they're the guys who invented it, so I mean, they
Oh,
got the Greenwich
I
Mean
get it.
Time.
that's why.
British
Okay.
summertime, the chat room is
To them, it's just
British
to,
summertime.
to them, they
Okay.
don't care about the time zone.
BST.
Is Josh's point. He's just
BS,
like,
correct. BS time. Yeah, that sounds right. I'll go with that.
Sure.
We do so when we record it. Whenever time it is that we record it, we do so at pcper.com/live, which you can subscribe to an email list here, and we'll let you know when we're going to stream things, when we are going to. And sometimes, most of the time it's the podcast, but other times we have other streaming events. We have a couple of those lined up for the month of May already. Logitech's going to come out here towards the end of May, tell us all about some of the new technologies they're working on, do some really cool demos, give away a bunch of hardware.
We got our mouse pad ready.
We've got our giant mouse pad ready for them to test whatever speed mouse
Yes.
they want to get into. But if you go to pcper.com/subscribe, you can sign up for a mailing list. All we need is your name and email address, and all we do is send you an email when we are announcing those specific events when they're going to occur. So that way you get a little reminder and you make sure you don't miss any of the cool stuff that we happen to produce on a somewhat regular basis, I guess I'll say. Oh, and a quick reminder, Jeremy, do you remember the exact date of the next VLAN? I did forget to...
30th May.
Is it May 30th? And it's in May. I know it's towards the end of it, but keep that in mind. Go to the forums.pcper.com and go to the gaming section. You'll see a VLAN announcement thread, but we'll talk more about it in the coming weeks as we build up to that as well. Those are always a lot of fun. Let's get into some stuff. First up, an ECS motherboard review written by Mori, the very simply named Z97PK. Now,
Wow.
we often complain about obtuse model numbers that
Yeah.
Gigabyte has out there.
Yeah.
We're complaining about a model number that an Acer laptop that we're working on has.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Z97 PK.
That's it.
That's it.
You know, 2 letters is
Not the
probably
PK Subban?
2 letters is probably plenty to put
Damn it.
at the end after Z97, and you could pretty much cover, you know, like hundreds of combinations there with just a couple of letters.
26 times 26.
Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty good.
You could do that. I'm not going to do that math, but I can tell you what.
That's a lot.
It's more than 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a budget Z97 MATX motherboard. Right, so it's using the high-end chipset, but it has an MSRP of just $79. I think a couple weeks ago we looked at another kind of low-cost Z97 platform as well. I mean, you can tell kind of just looking at, excuse me, some of the pictures here, like where it differentiates from the high-end stuff, right? So you can see like there's missing, that looks like, that's just like a PCI slot, isn't it?
No, it's a peg slot.
No.
Is it?
Yep.
No, wait.
No,
No,
'cause
it's
It's got
PCI.
3 of
That's
them.
PCI.
A 16x, a 16x electrical that's 4x, and then a single.
Right, right. But there's pinout for one here, and I think that's a legacy
Yeah, it is
PCI,
PCI.
PCI. And you can tell when you look at the back configuration, you've got VGA, you've got DVI, you've got HDMI, PS2. You've
Is
only got
that,
2
uh,
USB 3.0.
Is that like not Intel gigabit, I'm guessing,
I would say surely not.
since it's so low
It
cost?
says Realtek.
Realtek,
Yeah.
Realtek,
Right above there.
gigabit fast Ethernet.
Yeah, so, you know, that's, you know,
I mean, it's
they got to cut some corners.
it's fine, but yeah, but it's not a drastic.
No,
Oh,
it's
come
Realtek,
on. Like,
Realtek's fine.
like an Intel Gigi controller is really head and shoulders above the
No,
rest.
no, it's not.
It's not. You're right. It does have two-way multi-graphics support, although I don't know if I saw SLI listed specifically. Did we see that?
Well, the other slot is a by 4 electrical, so that
Okay. Well, then it would only really support Crossfire. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
NVIDIA blocks out by 4 PCI Express slot support in
Yeah.
their driver. So
and Crossfire might not be that pleasurable with only a by 4, right?
if it's, I don't know. If that by 4 is actually coming from the processor, it's probably fine.
Okay.
But
Probably it's coming from the Southie, which is not so fine.
You think it would be coming from that? I would think
I
the
think
by
so.
1 might be, but I don't know. I'd have to see the. Either way, it's not an ideal situation, especially if you're using high resolution. The bit larger the resolution, larger frame size that has to go across.
Yep.
That's when you might actually run into some issues. So it's a small board. It's kind of like your plain basic brown PCB. Remember those?
Look at the size of that heat sink.
Yeah.
I miss those brown PCBs.
Hey, how about that CMOS battery placement? Even with
Oh, yeah,
a
you can
large
get right
video
at it.
card in, you can take it out.
Yeah.
Unless,
Unless your video
unless
card
you
has a
have a
backplate.
really big cooler
Yeah.
on your
Well, Maury
CPU.
doesn't use big coolers. Come on.
He does
No,
not.
of course not. I mean, pretty simplistic designs here. You still, I mean, the thing that's interesting about this is like, I look at all the systems that we use around our office with only a couple of exceptions, and hey, it's got 4 DIMM slots, and hey, it's got 6 SATA ports.
That covers pretty much whatever
supports
we're
a
doing.
full-size graphics card.
Yeah.
And it's got Z97 chipset, which is probably unnecessary for people who aren't overclocking and doing a lot of tweaking.
Right.
It does only have a by 4 ATX 12-volt connection, like supplementary power.
Sure.
But again, if you're not doing overclocking, then
Yeah.
You
You
know,
don't really need it that bad.
sure, right?
You probably get a little bit over.
And of course, Maury does not use large heat sinks,
no way.
so these
No.
pictures don't. I mean, they're just.
Yeah.
Oh, keep going. Take a look at the installed video card. It's in there. It works.
Oh, look at the side. Look at the other profile.
So, what were you saying about
is-
getting to that CMOS battery?
Yeah, I was going to say it's it's not accessible to Maury.
No.
Fail.
One day I want to look through one of his reviews and just see like a tiny ass heatsink that he like
Yeah.
just pulls a joke on everybody. He's
Yeah, like a 1U heatsink.
Yeah.
It's just like this
Yeah.
super, Yeah.
So I mean, it's very basic, very minimal included accessories, very minimal. Like ECS doesn't have a huge software suite like Asus does. I mean, you can look at some of like their tuning, right, and that's about as plain as you could get for motherboard.
They have
overclocking
something.
and tweaking capability. Yeah.
You
I mean,
know.
there's there whether or not you use it or not.
Better than nothing, but
Again,
not
for
by
the
much.
type of system you're using, probably not particularly earth-shattering.
But again, it's like $79 motherboard,
This
right?
is a $79 retail motherboard, and it still got overclocked up to 4.7 gigahertz. Although I think he was unable to change off the 100 megahertz base clock.
What is the typical cost of a CPU that you would plug into that board?
Well, I mean, typical
Z97, like what's a low cost Z97?
Well, it's going to be 110
Any
through
Haswell part.
330.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it performs well. It's
Unless you have the Pentium.
apparently it's on Newegg for $64.99 after a rebate.
Even better.
Yeah, $64.99 after a $15 rebate. So you get that. You can get a low cost Haswell part. What's that one you were talking about before, Ken? It was a Xeon part,
yeah,
actually.
the E3 20 something, like 21. I don't.
Apparently, there's a Xeon part that a lot of people are using now. That's like a quad core, like Xeon low end stuff. That's quad core hyper threaded
Yeah.
without integrated graphics. That's fairly low cost.
That's great.
$230, I think.
So it's a little bit lower clock speeds in the 4770K, right? And 4790K.
Yeah,
But you know, and then you're limited a little bit in how you can overclock it because
You're
you can't
limited
just
a
change.
lot,
You can't
but-
change the multiplier.
Well, that's true. So why
On it.
do you want to do that?
Well, because you're getting the quad core hyper threaded performance
Oh, that's true. For a
at
lower
at
cost.
like $120 less.
Yeah.
Right.
so instead of getting the i5, you're getting the
Yeah.
actual
Yeah.
true quad core hyper-threaded part.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, actually.
So no SATA Express M.2 ports. You wouldn't expect that on a board this price.
Right.
And like you said, no way to overclock. Even though it is a Z97 chipset, so you kind of have a little bit of an expectation of what you should be able to overclock with. Not really getting past 100 megahertz on that base clock. It did earn a silver award from Mori. So if you are looking for low cost platforms for a Haswell processor based system,
That's pretty much it.
you know, $80 as low as
Oh,
65.
look at that power supply. That's what, 3-phase?
Yeah. Yep.
Ow.
Yep.
Yeah, not overclocking friendly.
Not
but boy,
overclocking friendly.
inexpensive.
Yep. So that's a pretty interesting part. And I don't know if I've seen any other Z97 boards that low. Probably there have been, but not that I know of. And other, we'll say, mainstream system news or product news. Lee did post a review of the Silverstone SFXL series. It's a 500 watt power supply. This is of the SFX form factor, which is small, as you can see here, but it's not as small as the SFX. So it's SFX long.
Okay.
I don't know if that's really what it stands for, but
It's
It
got
is-
a bolt-on adapter
for
fitting into an ATX system.
okay, so you don't have to have an
So-
SFX system. You
Exactly.
To fit it.
okay?
It's an interesting sort of go-between.
So SFX is small.
Small form factor.
Yeah.
SFX was a form factor invented by Silverstone, I believe. Yeah, to be able to get power supplies in smaller cases without having to
Yeah.
conform to the standard ATX sizes,
Right.
right? Because even the smallest ATX power supplies are going to be larger than that. So this is SFXL, which is kind of a step in between. 500 watt. I think you can get SFX up to 500 watts maybe. They might have released a 600 watt recently as well. But it is rated at 500 watt continuous. It's 100% modular in terms of, cables, flat ribbon style cables, 40 amps on the 12 volt rail on a single rail configuration there. You only get two PCIe 6+2 pin connectors. But that should be fine. I guess, again, a 500 watt power supply is really targeting somebody who's using a single GPU.
Yep.
And it does have a $99 MSRP. So again, in kind of the lower cost range for a high quality power supply like this. And you can
So
see,
it'll cost more than your motherboard.
Yeah.
yeah,
The $65
I was
motherboard
just-
you just picked up for
Yeah.
this.
I was about to say this might be good to pair with that motherboard until you said the price. and then I
Absolutely.
was like,
yeah. I mean, and you can take a look at you get an idea of the size of the power supply, just kind of like comparing it to the size of the ATX power connector right next to it. It's a
Pretty
small
small.
power supply.
Yeah.
It's not tiny, but it's small. And here's the adapter that Jeremy was mentioning to mount it to a standard ATX.
It's just a little bit bigger than 120 millimeter case fan.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean,
like
you know,
the
Silverstone.
dimensions.
When I saw these at CES, I mean, yeah, they're really small. I mean, they're pretty dense and heavy, and they don't make a huge amount of noise, which is nice. But they were really proud of how compact they're able to make these things, and the price is a little bit higher, but their efficiency is good, and the build quality is kind of second to none.
Yeah, Silverstone has been doing power supplies for as long as I've been doing PC work, right?
Yeah.
And they were one of the first. I don't want to say the first, but one of the first to kind of get into the idea of high performance, high quality, meant for enthusiast type power supplies. We used Silverstones on our CPU and GPU test beds for quite a long time, back in the 2000s, I guess I'll say. It's just, you can see some of the internal circuitry here. Again, large capacitors, lots of copper. There's some of that glue to keep things from vibrating, Alan, as we
Copper.
have history with here.
Coil line.
Glue.
Today. Yeah, we'll go with glue. Pretty good results here. Good efficiency. Again, as Lee says here, it's combines 500 watts of combined DC output, the small form factor market in an extended chassis.
Fan doesn't kick on till about 250 watt load.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it appears so. You get a 5-year warranty on some of their power supplies, but this one only comes with a 3-year warranty. So that's kind of a downside to it as well. I'm trying to. I don't like price search power supplies very often, but I'm trying to figure out if $99 is like, what can you get for $99 if you go with a full size ATX?
Half again the power.
Maybe
Yeah.
750
Yeah.
for a decent
Okay.
750.
Or you can spend
But
like
it
70
won't
or 80
be
bucks for like
mostly silent. It might not be fully modular. But
Yeah.
then again, if you want that in a full-sized one,
Sure.
you're paying a premium.
So I mean,
It's-
Lee does put a picture here of like, this is the small form factor implementation of that power supply, right? So what is this? Is this the Corsair case? I can't tell which case this is now. Jam packed full of stuff.
Oh, I remember
Holy
that picture
jeez.
from something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a Silverstone case.
is
Yeah,
it
I think
silver?
so.
Maybe.
I can't remember.
That was a
the name.
build he did for a power supply review, right?
it wasn't like
thought-
Cube or something, was it?
It may be that Cooler Master. The Elite, maybe?
Yeah, there he is. CM Elite 110.
Oh, there you go.
Mini ITX case. Yeah, we're using one of Silverstone's SFX. So again, another Silver Award product here. Weaknesses of 3-year warranty and a relatively high price for a 500 watt power supply, as Josh mentioned. But you get the size advantages, sound level advantages over some of the other options out there. So if you're interested in a small form factor power supply, check out that review from Lee. Now, we're going to talk about an ARM processor, the upcoming Cortex A72. This is a new architecture, new design, based off the A57, you would say, right, Josh? For sure.
Yes, heavily massaged, just like that phone that you're continually spinning
I like to spin the phone.
with your left hand.
I like to spin it.
You know, you should put a little, a money bucket every time you spin the phone. You drop some money in, and next time we show up in Vegas, we spend that on.
I was going to say that we
Thanks.
create a bucket, and as many times as I turn it, other people have to donate $1. So it's like when I used to go door to door and say, "Hey, I'm going to do a walkathon for cancer," when I was in school. You owe me $1 for every lap I take around the gym, and I think this is really equivalent. Only the money can go to our gambling.
And people will think you go to spin class. Think
Sure.
before you do this.
I don't care what they think as long as I get their money. I'm going to be honest with you.
Fair enough.
All right, well, spin away then.
So tell us about the Cortex A72, Joshua.
Well, we had heard about this a couple of months back. I think back in February, they released some of the initial specifications of the Cortex A72, but essentially it was the name, some very basic specifications saying that it's going to be more power efficient, it's going to be more performance, and that's all we're willing to tell you right now.
Yep.
Well, they had an editor's day over in London that you went to
I did.
and heard about and I wrote about in Wyoming, in Laramie, in the snow.
That's unfortunate. It was, I will tell you, just to make you feel a little bit better, it did only get up to like 64 over there.
Yeah, I got to suffer through 2 days of multi 60 car plus pileups on either side of Laramie due to
Of the,
the
one
weather.
road.
Yeah, so that was
Apparently due to a
I had-
Canadian even.
Yeah, I had that going for me.
That
so
was
that
just
was
sad.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, A72 is not a radical redesign, but it is a significant redesign. It is an ARM V8A based processor, so it's 64-bit. It is along the lines of the A57, but it is supercharged in terms of not just performance, but power efficiency. Even using the same process technology, we see massive increases in power efficiency, which will also turn into more performance when you equalize the amount of power delivered to the SoC. So essentially, they've taken the A57, they have gone through every module and execution unit and have optimized that. They've created a much more dense product. So in ways, this is kind of like what AMD was talking about with their HD design libraries that they applied to the Excavator core and Carrizo. And they've done this with ARM. And this is not only a redesign, but they're utilizing the latest 14 nanometer and 16 nanometer products from GlobalFoundries, Samsung, and of course TSMC with their 16 nanometer FinFET. Performance looks to be really, really, really good. Not only are each individual core looking to be pretty fast, but the overall SoC, when you have more than one core, whether that be 4 or 8, they've really beefed up the interconnects. They have done so much for these that it looks like A72 is going to be a really stinking fast ARM processor. Now, how that compares to something like, the Core i5 or Core i7s, which are, anywhere from 35 watts up to 87 watts at this time, we're not entirely sure.
And even more important to that is that Cortex A72 won't be in a shipping product for probably a year. So you really need to talk about what they're going to compete against is something like Skylake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But ARM has something going for them, and that's the architecture. It is designed from the get-go to be very low power, but still pretty good performance. Now, Intel and AMD, their x86 designs have always been kind of high performance, that they're trying to get them into low power, and they've done okay with that. But the cutbacks and the compromises that they've had to do to get to those wattages have not been entirely friendly in terms of overall performance. And this is just a CISC type processor that has risky type features internal to the core versus a pure RISC processor, which doesn't have to go through nearly as many hoops to get that kind of power efficiency and performance. So A72 looks to be a really interesting part. Again, it's not going to show up until 2016, and we don't know exactly when. It could be the first part of the year, it could be second quarter, it could be second half. But going for ARM is that they have been improving from the last several generations of when they announce a product to when we actually see shipping products. So they have the A72 design out. It has design rules for both TSMC 16 nanometer and Samsung's 14 nanometer. So it's now up to their licensees to take these products, verify them, rent out some fab space, and start production in a reasonable amount of time. That's going to be the interesting thing here.
Yeah,
of course.
Keep in mind the A72 is going to be a flagship part that's really targeting like the flagship high-end smartphones, tablets, and also their kind of server inroads that they're trying to make, right? So
the high-density blade servers, which will utilize these chips.
Yep, and so it's interesting to think about it, right? Because on the mobile side, we know ARM is kind of they're the incumbent, right? They're the leader in all of these markets, whether it be in a Qualcomm custom chip, an ARM custom chip, or an off-the-shelf core that we see in other designs. But in the server market, it was interesting to get some feedback from them on what customers like PayPal, for example. I wrote this in the story that PayPal is one of the customers, their kind of flagship customer that's up and running with ARM-based servers. They're using the HP Moonshot system, which is the blade style. And they're talking about specific numbers, and these are numbers from PayPal, not ARM, is what they keep telling us. And it's like, 9x lower cost of entry, you know, like 4x higher density, 6x lower power consumption per year, that type of thing for certain workloads like real-time analytics, and that type of stuff. So, but it's interesting to think about how will an A72 core be able to compete against something like, what was the recently announced, was Xeon D? Is that the one that was like an Atom-based core Xeon part, right? Or even up to, you know, some of the lower wattage Skylake parts when those start shipping. So, you know, it was interesting if you look back a year ago, 2 years ago, especially, ARM server story was this kind of big, it's going to take over the world thing. Now it seems to be much more modulated. It seems to be much more tempered, but they are still kind of aggressively approaching that field. And the A72 is interesting because it's going to attack kind of both of those fields. And I also found it interesting that in one of the slides on the first page, we saw that they're going to pair the A72 with A53 for their big little combinations, as opposed to coming up with another A70 or something like that, some other kind of core to match along with it. We're used to kind of seeing, 57 and 53 go together for big, little, that type of stuff. So
A50 and an A7.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's kind of like I don't want to say generational shift, but something to that effect. So I came away from it and I talked with several people there that are more ingrained in the ARM ecosystem than I am, that don't work for ARM, that really do believe that the A72 is going to be a fantastic success part based on its performance, based on its efficiency, based on where it will come in with the new process technology as well. So we'll see.
Certainly for handhelds, when they start popping down the power, then you get just as good a performance as flagships, but you're going to get around 35 to 50% better battery life. And so that's, how fast are these stinking things right now? And, you can go a day with decent usage. Yeah. But, instead you have a day and a half to 2 days of battery life.
I'm also curious to see, so it's not really a secret at this point that Qualcomm has had issues with their 810, Snapdragon 810, and a lot of claims of phones overheating and not working right now. Those Qualcomm parts were using off-the-shelf A57 plus A53 designs, right?
Plus their Adreno graphics.
Right. Will those go away when Qualcomm finally implements its kind of custom 64-bit version of those parts? Will A72 improve improve those situations, right? Will people not run into the same issues? I don't know if the Qualcomm issue is directly related to 5753, or maybe it is the GPU itself. But
modern SoCs are complex anyway. You may license all of these parts from somebody, and then you throw in some of your own secret sauce, and next thing you know, it's just not working like you were hoping it to, and you've got this multi-billion transistor SoC that...
And I think the process technology has a lot to do with it, right? My guess is when they were starting the 57, 53, they were kind of thinking we would already be at 16, 14. And maybe that didn't happen, and the move back to 20 was more disadvantageous than people expected. So I don't know. It's a good write-up on the A72 if you're curious about kind of what crap goes into your fancy smartphone that you keep in your pocket or tablet you have sitting on your desk. Worth a look. And we're gonna have some more stuff going on the next couple of weeks with ARM as well, so stay tuned for that. Now, contest. If you signed up for our live email, I mentioned a contest.
Take our stuff, please.
This is actually a continuance of a contest from last month where nobody wanted to take all the hardware. So last month we partnered with Hardware Canucks on a YouTube video contest thing where we gave away a whole bunch of stuff, right? First place got, a lot of crap. And this... a
lot of people signed up, and then when the contest was done...
we had a lot of comments, a lot of people who subscribed.
Yeah.
And the issue, as it turned out, was YouTube's messaging system is awful.
That's true.
Nobody uses Google+.
That's also true.
And those were the two ways I had of contacting people who commented on YouTube. So, literally, I picked 15 winners over the course of 2 weeks.
Yep.
I had a total of 2 responses of those 15 people. One of them lived in England, when the part of the contest rules were very clearly.
Who's probably watching right now?
He's probably watching, very upset.
At 3 a.m.
He's really upset.
It was very clearly a U.S. and Canada only contest. We were very upfront about that.
Yep.
So the one person who won, this is actually good news for him, the one person who lived in the U.S. and responded actually was the third place winner.
Okay.
But because he was the only guy nice enough to respond, we bumped him up to first place.
All right.
So he's going to get all the cool stuff. But we still have a couple of collections to get rid of.
Yeah, which are not shabby.
Oh, heck no.
No.
So if you go to PCPer.com, look for the title, Please Take This Hardware From Us.
Yep.
Because now it's just sitting around and we just need to get rid of it.
Look at the number of entries.
Yeah, we've had a lot of people enter. So now
Oh, wow. Look, it's a system.
we're using a Gleam.io system
We can
that
actually
requires
track.
you to send an email address in order to sign out.
All right.
Right? So we should not have this issue anymore.
Thank goodness.
I will say that we've already had people submit that live in England. I don't know if the people in the UK just see US and Canada and they go, they mean us too. Like it's some kind of, we used to own them. They can't possibly not send us prizes if we win, right?
Tish tosh.
So
we all speak the same mother tongue.
that's right. So you can win, like first prize, you still get an EVGA GTX 960, an Asus Maximus 7 Formula motherboard, an Asus Gladius mouse, a 1 terabyte Crucial BX100 SSD, a Fantex cooler, and 2 Fantex fans. And then another winner will get an EVGA GTX 960 as well as an Asus Gladius mouse. And all you have to do to enter is subscribe to PC Perspective on YouTube, subscribe to the Hardware Canucks channel on YouTube, watch a video, and watch a video.
All
and
right.
so you can, honestly, you can actually just choose to, like if you only want to subscribe to PC Per, you can do that. It's worth 1 entry. You can basically get up to 4 entries.
No, that's pretty
on this.
sweet, actually.
So it's kind of neat how it works now. We'll probably use this for contests going forward because
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with that crap ever again.
Anymore.
We're just
So if you see somebody that is from Laramie, Wyoming, and is maybe a female, just go ahead and send them
name
the
is
stuff.
Josh. Her name is
Send her?
Joshina.
You mean send her the stuff?
Joshina.
Exactly. All right, I haven't filled anything out.
And if you've already subscribed to PC Per or Hardware Canucks, then it will just validate your subscription and then you will be entered. All right. So,
Well, that's cool, too.
Yeah, so it works out well. So please go enter that. Go to PCPer.com. Search for Please Take This Hardware. You will find that contest there, and please enter. Or go to PCPer.com/podcast and find the show notes for this episode. That might be an easier way for you to find that URL. So, Josh, we have a couple AMD stories we're going to get to here as
No, we
well. Do we
don't.
want to reverse this order? Do we want to talk about the roadmap before the Zen or the Zen before the roadmap?
You know, it doesn't matter, but I let's just go with the Zen.
All right, we'll talk about the Zen. So AMD Zen diagram leaks, but not the circles.
Yeah, that's a.
Not the circles.
Oh.
That would be a Venn diagram.
It's a Venn diagram.
Zen is
Close.
pretty damn close.
Yeah, yeah. So Zen is their next generation CPU architecture, the one that we have been hearing about for quite some time. But a little bit of information weaseled its way onto the web.
Yeah, it seems that AMD is having an analyst, a financial analyst meeting in May 6th. That's what the bottom of the slideshow presentation says.
I find
and
that hilarious.
I'm thinking that's fine. And it compares and contrasts the latest excavator core that is found in the upcoming Carrizo chip, and it compares it to Zen. Now, Zen is supposedly a more simplified, a more traditional type CPU in that it doesn't go with the CMT or the core multi-threading, which we saw with the Bulldozer and its variants, where you've got 2 integer cores and a shared floating point,
Right.
and a bunch of other shared front-end parts that we found out just didn't work very well for IPC or scaling performance. So they're kind of going back. Now, some people are calling this the Phenom 3, and that's not exactly true. As we know, Jim Keller
Damn
came
it.
back from Apple after making the rounds to several different places like PA Semi and AMD before. So it's kind of a big circle. And I think the push was, hey, let's go back to what works. We're not going to get too terrible fancy because we have fallen so far behind trying to polish up this architecture that some people call bad words for good reason, because AMD has not had some really good quarters lately based on this architecture. And that's an understatement.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it looks like a much beefier implementation. The first thing we know is that it's got 6 integer pipes, and we don't know how many of those are address generating units versus just execution units. We know that the floating point has been beefed up as well. It's 2 FMAC 256-bit units. There's some speculation that they could work together to provide a single 512-bit AVX instruction, but that, obviously, looking at this small, simple block diagram, that's a bit of a stretch because even Intel right now has 2 256-bit AVX units that do not fuse into one 512-bit.
Oh, they don't?
Not yet, at least.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can glean a couple of things from here. It looks like that they really are focusing on better IPC. 4 of these cores can be put in one module that will share 8 megs of L3 cache, and you can put multiple of these modules together, just like kind of Bulldozer and its Brood did in the past. But each one will have 512K of L2 cache. And something else that came out is that they are going away from exclusive cache. Now, Bulldozer, I believe, had kind of strange mix of inclusive versus exclusive, but this looks to be a fully inclusive design. So I think it's 128K of L1 cache divided in between data and instruction, and that is mirrored in the L2 cache, which is 512K,
Right.
and then that is mirrored into the L3 cache. So you've got essentially 2 megs of L3 cache that is just all mirrored from
Right.
L1 and L2, which is not necessarily a bad thing because Intel has been doing that and doing it well for
Yeah, I mean
the
that's
past
a
decade.
that's a basic CPU design decision, inclusive.
Yeah,
exclusive,
it's
and
very
There's
efficient.
trade-offs for both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you waste cache space, but the implementation overall is much simpler and apparently more efficient overall, especially considering you've got 8 megs of L3 cache to play with, because you've got 6 megs of still to do whatever you want with in terms of data, which
Right.
for guys like Jeremy, 6 megs is more than enough.
You'll never need
God,
more than
yeah.
6 megs of cache.
Oh, it's crazy. You got plenty left over.
So what was
Yes.
what was this last bit? Is it so? What am I trying to say here? Gone will be the days of it's a quad core, or it's an 8 core. No, it's really a quad core. No, it's really an 8 core. Right?
Hopefully,
we won't
right?
have that debate anymore.
Well, we're still going to have that because they're moving from CMT to SMT. So each core will handle 2 threads. So you've got
Well,
quad core that'll handle 8 threads, just like
Sure.
Intel. And at the high end, you're going to have, at least on the desktop, you're going to have 2 quad cores with 16 threads, which is kind of nice, which we'll go into soon.
but I guess what I mean is they're not sharing fundamental compute resources like the Bulldozer setup did.
No, they are not. They're moving away from that. So it looks like that they really are focusing on integer and floating point performance and moving away from, kind of the double int and shared floating point of the previous Bulldozer modules.
Gotcha. What is your, let's say, level of expectation after you see this data?
Well, considering where AMD has been since the release of Bulldozer, I think expectations are high that they can at least move past that
better.
type of performance.
They don't mention anything here about clock speeds or anything quite yet.
I mean, they can boost IPC as much as they want, but whatever they do with IPC, they have to balance it out with clock speeds. So you can have, these pipelines that have, let's say, 8 stages, but you're going to be limited in clock speed to, let's say, 2 gigahertz,
Right.
and you're still eating up 65 to 95 watts of power. So, I mean, they break up that pipeline to 16 stages, and you can increase the clock speed and still stay within that TDP, but it's a really fine balance between IPC and overall performance, and getting that balance right. And so far, Intel has done very, very well in that. And AMD with Bulldozer, they kind of went back to Intel's Pentium 4, where, hey, clock speed is king, and we can just extract more performance by jacking up the clock speed. And suddenly they're looking at it as like, hey, we can't get past 4 gigahertz effectively unless we have a 220 watt TDP part.
225 again? Oh, no. All right, so that is what we know about Zen today. Josh, if you were the walrus,
Cuckoo Choo.
would you tell me about Styx?
Styx. Other than that really awesome 70s and 80s band, no, I can't.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we can tell you a little bit about the processor side, because not only did they have a Zen leak, but they had, I'm assuming from basically the same slide deck, 2015, 2016 roadmaps come out as well.
Yeah, this is actually kind of a more interesting thing than the block diagram of Zen. We knew what Zen kind of was. We didn't know some of the specifics, but we knew essentially what we were going to expect. But this tells us a little bit more information. We see what's going to be in the 2015 roadmap, going from on the mobile side and the desktop side. Desktop side, well, I guess we can start with the mobile side first. And I've got to get this up
just
on
what I brought up.
The roadmap. And, of course, we've got Carrizo. Not Chorizo, but Carrizo coming up.
Damn it.
And that's going to be the top mobile APU. Now, they have done a lot of things with Carrizo. It looks like it's going to be a pretty significant jump in efficiency. It may not be huge in performance, but their efficiency is going to get them a lot closer where they may sell a lot more products than what we have seen lately with their lower power and mobile type applications. So it's going to have, a solid GCN compute unit. It's going to be lower power. It's still 28 nanometer. It's going to be a full SoC. And interesting, it's going to share the same socket infrastructure, though I don't really want to say socket. It's the FP4 BGA. Mm-hmm. And we'll share that with the Carrizo L APU, which is based on the Puma Plus CPU cores, which is their low power. And we're talking 10 watt to 15 watt in these type of applications. GCN graphics unit, AMD secure processor. And again, it's going to share a lot of the same infrastructure as the full-size Carrizo. So people, OEMs who have, a couple of levels of low-end laptops, they don't have to change a whole lot of things to go from one to the other just because they all share a lot of the same infrastructure, which we have not seen from AMD.
I'm not a huge fan of... Yeah, that is good. I'm not a huge fan of calling it Carrizo L when it fundamentally has a different CPU architecture than Carrizo, but whatever.
Yeah, but those, ever since, Bobcat, Jaguar, those guys have been released, a lot of people have looked at those low power parts and said, why don't you scale these up and do it at the high end rather than this bulldozer architecture, which just seems like a dead end, which
it is.
It is. And so I think that they have taken a lot of the lessons learned with Bobcat, Jaguar, Puma Plus, all of these architectures, and are applying that to Zen. But in the meantime, we're going to see some of the last iterations of these older generations of products. And so Carrizo L is that. I'm going to be interesting to see what it does, because I've got, an AM1 processor and motherboard behind me that performed really well considering how little power it drew.
I like the green box under here, the Amur. Amur?
I think so.
Amur.
This is going to be AMD's first ARM offering. It's based on an A57 core. It's going to be low power. We're talking
with AMD graphics. So this is not just like we're going to take Mali and we're going to take A57.
Yeah.
No, this is significant. This is the first ARM-based AMD graphics since when ATI sold off their Adreno,
the old Adreno
to Qualcomm.
What was it called before? Imagion.
Yep. Yeah, so it's kind of significant. I mean, it is going to be Core A57. It's a licensed CPU, But they're going to put that in an SoC
Yeah.
and sell it off this year.
It's interesting though that the very next year they don't have an ARM core in that roadmap.
Oh, they do though.
Oh, K12. Okay. Yeah. All right. That's their custom version.
That is their custom. So AMD not only
That's not
licensed
green.
specific parts, but they license the ISA, and they're building their own custom core called the K12, and that will take over from Amur in 2016. It'll be a 14 nanometer S. Two of these K12 cores, next generation GCN, full HSA 1.0 support. It might be the first ARM product to feature HSA 1.0. We don't know that for sure yet. We still got, 8 months left in 2015. A lot of things can happen.
I will say that in all of my ARM meetings, that question has always come up: is what's your stance on HSA? And every single company, whether it be Qualcomm or ARM or MediaTek or whoever, has always said, whenever we get there, it's fine. Nobody has seemed to be very aggressively targeting that.
Yeah, because there's no software infrastructure
Correct.
for HSA at this time. There's no killer app.
Especially not in the mobile side.
Yeah. I mean, if AMD can come in with HSA and say, hey, here's this open source camera and image filtering technology that can do all these amazing things, and I'm going to give it away for free, you bet your ass people are going to jump on that, because cameras are about the only damn thing that differentiates cell phones from one another anymore.
And then we've got Bristol Ridge and Basilisk.
Basilisk.
Which I think is...
You're putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Which I think is the coolest code name of all the stuff we're looking at here.
Yeah, and so Zen is taking over the mobile. And, it's a very flexible part. They can do things in terms of process technology to allow for lower leakage and better power consumption, but of course it'll come at the cost of clock speed.
Right.
So Zen up to 4 on Bristol Ridge, next gen GCN, HSA 1.0, True Audio, all these good things that we hope to see in the mobile that will be a much more effective and competitive part from AMD, and certainly they will be closer in terms of process technology. Not quite as good as what the Intel 14 nanometer second generation FinFETs will be, but we're getting to the point where process technology is it's a big factor, but once they get to that point, there's so many compromises involved. It's going to be design more than process technology that will really push somebody forward, and this is what AMD is really hoping for with these Zen cores. And then, of course, the Basilisk is cut in half. I would imagine it's 2 cores with 4 megs of L3 cache. Whether or not it's a full design that way or they've disabled parts to get there, we have no idea. But what's impressive is that's a 5 watt to 15 watt part. Previously, AMD couldn't get x86 down below 10 watts effectively. Yeah, they had Beema that was 2.2 watt SDP, but it was running so damn slow. It was non-competitive with a lot of the ARM tablets
but low
out
power.
there. What?
Yeah, but low power.
Yeah, low power and GCN graphics, and nobody ever. How many Beema tablets have you seen?
It's pretty close to 0. I'm gonna go 0.
Yeah, that would be 0 pretty much. So
what about how does that compare to the desktop side of stuff? I guess
the desktop, of course, is where things get interesting because we're enthusiasts. We like power. We like things that go fast, that
Bump
produce
in the
heat.
I was just gonna
Allow
say.
us to use really large heat sinks and fans and not feel bad about it.
fair enough.
So anyway, 2015 for desktop, of course, performance, it still kind of stinks because we've still got PileDriver, FX, AM3 Plus processors out there.
It's unchanged.
It's unchanged. We're not going to see anything above the, 9590, 9570? I can't remember the exact. But you go for AM3 Plus, you know that you've got a processor that will last the lifetime of the AM3 Plus socket. There will be no upgrades coming anytime soon for that. And that's fine. Godavari. We've heard about that for a little while. It's essentially a power and speed optimized Kaveri. It's not even HSA 1.0 compliant. It has HSA features, but it's not HSA 1.0. So you're looking at about 100 to 200 megahertz of difference between the different SKUs of the previous generation Kaveri and the Godavari. And finally, 2015, we've still got Bima.
Heck yeah, you just talked that one up. Let's move on to 2016.
Yeah. So, of course, the most exciting is the Summit Ridge CPU.
So
they
excited.
have this listed as 2 Zen modules. So that's 8 cores, 16 threads, running upwards of, well, we can only imagine 95 to 100 watt TDP.
I hope.
It's a new socket, FM3. And I'm assuming they're doing FM3 because this will support DDR4 memory.
I would think so.
At this time. Yeah. It would make sense. Intel has blazed the route, the trail, with DDR4, and by that time, DDR4 prices will be at a point where AMD can latch on and say, hey, we've got it too. This is going to be perfectly fine.
Sure.
So you've got a product, a high-end processor, hopefully, that will have 8 cores, 16 threads, and 16 megs of L3 cache, which is pretty nice. It sounds like, from this point, a pretty solid processor technology, and we can only hope that they are competitive with Intel in 2016 when this finally arrives. And I think that certainly expectations are so low, it will surpass most other people's expectations. Whether or not they beat Intel, I doubt they will.
Yeah.
But they will be more competitive with this architecture, I think.
All right.
They certainly can't go backwards. I mean, if they did, then everybody should be fired.
Okay. No, I'm okay with that statement. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the other 2 products on here are going to be Bristol Ridge and Basilisk for mainstream, essentially. And we've already kind of went over those. So it looks like a pretty flexible architecture that they can do a lot of things. It's modularized, but it's modularized in a way that shouldn't detract from its overall performance.
Yep.
So we'll see.
It's pretty interesting stuff. Like, we've been waiting for this for a long time. I think it's fair to say Zen was probably not supposed to be pushed back into 2016 when we first started hearing about it, right?
No, I think when Keller came on, that was 2016 was when it's going to be ready, and they were hoping sooner, but no. They kind of just said Zen is and our K12 is going to be 2016. They never pushed it back.
All right. We'll see what part 2016, as it turns out, is a full calendar year.
December.
So it could be January or it could be December. We'll see.
Be.
Hopefully soon. We need them to survive to release Zen.
Okay.
And they shall.
fair?
They've got cash on hand, and they've battened
Dollars?
down the hatches.
Cash money.
But
Well,
past 2017, things look pretty sketchy.
Let's hope Zen is a rousing success. Let's go through a handful of news items here. NZXT announces the Noctis 450 gaming mid-tower enclosure. There you go. It is bold as back. A striking looking case. Based on the H440, it combines angular external construction. Looks similar to the company's Phantom enclosure series, but it has an identical interior to the H440. Excellent cooling support from the previous model. It also adds a PWM fan controller for 4 fans. Includes the 4 fans, actually. Further simplifying cooling for a build with this case. There's a fancy schmancy video of it available in white as well. This is another one of those cases that I enjoy that has no front optical bays, because what are you doing with an optical drive?
I love optical drives.
What are you doing? Yeah.
I've still got my Kenwood.
BD, is it a BDR HD DVD
True
player?
X Max.
I've got a-
Exactly. It's 56X CD-ROM. I had to, in fact, buy a PCI a card to have a PATA connection that goes to my Kenwood. But it's worth
PCI,
every
not
penny.
PCI Express. Gotcha.
Yeah.
This has an MSRP of $139.99. It apparently is available available for pre-order from NZXT. I mean, look, it's got an angular CPU cutout tray. How much
That's styling.
more cool could you get?
It's
Ooh.
edgy.
I mean, Jeremy, do you need a case with an angular CPU cutout bay?
Do you not?
I think only Maury would.
How could you not want that to
Maury only
show
wants a
off
CPU
when your
cutout
case is open?
Maury wants a CPU cut out the size of the whole motherboard.
so
for
he
the-
can put the
heatsink.
large heatsink through it.
Yes.
Wait,
On
no, I
both
got it.
sides.
They should put the CMOS battery on the backside where the cutout is.
Oh.
There you go.
That's the next $1 million idea.
Man,
You
I'm
just
going
said
to
it out
edit
loud.
this out of the
We're
podcast.
live. No, we're live
That's
now.
it.
You
would not-
Mounted CMOS.
It's out there now.
No, you jacked up now. You are done. All right, so that's the what did I say? Noctis 450.
Yep.
Alan, Samsung Magician 4.6 and 840 Evo firmware update was throttled. Now it's not. What do we want to say
Yeah.
about this?
Came out. There wasn't like full speed
You
initially.
talked about the actual,
like, it wasn't
like,
like
the actual changes last week, right?
Yeah, we talked about
Okay.
the changes.
Because I listen to the shows when I'm not.
The gist of it is it's good. It brings the speed back to where it should be. And then they added an optimization, like an advanced optimization, which rewrites all the files on the drive. You know, if they were previously randomly written, it rewrites them sequentially. So that actually makes an SSD even faster. That would apply to any SSD, not just like an 840 Evo. But hey, there's a button there now you can hit to make an 840 Evo maybe even faster than like a competing drive might be. You know, competing drive that didn't have that button to hit, right? Anyway, so that's as far as the firmware goes. That's good. It coming out kind of made some people grumpy because they throttled it, right?
They throttled how many times it could be downloaded over a 24-hour
Yeah,
period.
and then for those that tried to wise up and make mirrors of the Magician download, well, the firmware update itself had to get pulled from
So the
Samsung.
download didn't include the firmware. The download was just a software.
Yeah.
And then it had to access the firmware separately.
file
Okay.
and pull it down from Samsung, and that too, I guess, was throttled with no error message. In other words,
just errored
it
in
just
the
told you
software.
no, it just told you you're on the current firmware.
Oh.
So then you had some other people up in arms, and that added more confusion. But all that stuff's over now. They're not throttling anything
They
anymore.
were trying to do something intelligent with that, right?
They were, because they had 850 Pro, or was it an 840 Pro or an 850 Pro firmware update that came out like a couple months back, and that was trying to brick drives initially, and they were
The idea here is
kind of
that
worried.
we don't want if the firmware does something that we did not expect and it's bad.
Yeah.
We would rather it happen to 2,000 people a day than 10,000 people a day. Right. So.
Or hundreds of thousands of people.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think hundreds of thousands of people are updating their SSD firmware
Probably
on
not.
a daily basis, but that's the point, right? It's like, well, let's make sure we don't get 10 nasty emails for the first 500 people that download it.
Yeah.
When in fact we had 50,000 people download it or
So,
something.
it was throttled, not anymore now. I mean, actually, just on just a day or two ago, whatever the day was right after that window, that range, like the 27th, I think.
Yep. April 23rd to 27th.
Yeah, so on the 27th, like I just updated one of the 840 Evos on the storage test bed just by, Magician prompted me automatically just on boot and said, hey, there's an update to Magician. And I did that.
Okay.
And then it said,
So
hey,
it's all
there's
done.
an update to your SSD. And I just did that just to make sure that it all worked like it should, for the average Joe, right? All that's good to go now. It does what it's supposed to. There's a couple of issues. Now that there's an ISO out as well, right? Because the ISO is how people with Macs and people running Linux will update their 840 Evos. If you're running Ubuntu or what have you on Linux, that version of Linux, and you are either by default or because you have manually configured it, if you're doing a FS trim, which is basically Linux's, send a trim to all the empty space of the drive command. If you do that, Linux does that in a queued fashion, and that new firmware seems to not like that very much.
By not like that, it does what? Slows down or breaks the drive?
It just it does weird stuff until you reboot, basically.
Okay.
It kind of like just overloads it, right? Linux is more aggressive about issuing trim to SSDs than Windows is. Pretty sure all the way up to like the most current Windows, it only issues trim commands sequentially, not queued. Linux supports queued, so it can just throw like, thousands of trim commands at the SSD simultaneously, basically, which seems to have an issue with that firmware. I don't know more detail than that, other than there's a few Linux people that wrote us and said, hey, we're seeing this, You know,
Interesting.
but to those people, I said, well, I mean, you're still okay. Just turn that feature off. You don't necessarily need to trim the whole SSD every time you boot. Like it's kind of overkill because.
But then it looks like you've got bald patches.
Well, the OS should
smack
be
about me?
the OS should be taking care of that stuff as it goes along as
Right,
well. If you delete a
right.
file, it should trim that space, right? It's so, you know, you're pretty much covered, and you don't necessarily need to redo it. I think people got stuck in that mentality of defrag your hard drive, right? And now it's like trim your SSD, and it's not really.
Defrag your SSD.
No,
Oh.
don't do that.
But what if I put like 8 X25s in RAID and then defrag it?
X25Ms?
It would be like instantaneous, right?
Sure, yes.
You don't remember that video that
I
the
do.
guys got
do.
Intel to send them like 8 or 16 of those, and they
It was
defragged them?
it was other SSD. It was the Samsung drives or something. They put
No,
like 40
no.
of them
It was
in a RAID.
X25
Oh.
in array. But anyway,
Yeah.
now that I derailed this conversation,
Perfect.
So that was one issue, and then the other issue that's just kind of got people a little bit steamed up is that if you owned an mSATA 840 Evo, you know, so you have one in your laptop, right? They did make them. They did sell probably a decent number of them. This update does not work on that one for some reason. If you try to do it, it just says drive's not supported with like the ISO updater. Or if you try it with Magician, it just says you're on the current firmware. So I'm pretty sure there was a firmware for the mSATA for that same drive, basically, on the last round. In other words, when they had the performance restoration tool and everything, like it did it then. Now it doesn't. And even further, if you own an 840 Evo, that's the mSATA version right now, and you go to Samsung's site to try to download, you know, you can't even get to that middle firmware right now because they no longer have the performance restoration tool up,
Gotcha.
right? And so you're stuck basically 2 revisions ago.
Well, it seems like there should be somebody in charge of this to just like make sure that stuff doesn't happen,
Yeah,
right? Like,
there should be. I don't know what the deal is.
unless there's some technical reason, some fundamental technology difference, some hardware revision difference that makes the mSATA slightly different than what the SATA is,
I can't really think of why, since like the last
wouldn't
firmware
either.
worked for it as well, right?
and still nothing on the 840.
and still nothing on the 840s.
Cool beans.
We have questions to Samsung about the original 840, although there's a stack of those now that have not been answered, and there's.
Sweet.
I mean, it was answered once, and they said that those hadn't been reported.
Clearly
to
not the
us.
case anymore.
Yeah, and now
Here's
we
a comment. Here's a comment right here. Nothing on the 9 Evo 840. I'm tempted to defrag mine just to see if it will help.
Yeah. So there's
Yeah,
that.
but Coley will do it with a hammer, so that doesn't really count.
Hey, defrag's a defrag, man.
Yeah, I've also asked them. You know, they said, "Hey, I've passed your question along. We'll get back to you about the mSATA drives." We're just waiting.
Just waiting. Story of our lives.
hey, you know what? You're right. Those were Samsung drives. I'm watching the video now. I'm sorry. The
Is it
guy with the
defragged
red
yet?
hair, who's the IT genius, defragged all those Samsung drives.
and said, "Look at how fast they go."
To be fair,
that
when
was
it
that
this
same-
video. It was like 09 maybe.
That was that same
it
video.
was 2009.
That was the same video where they dropped the DVD of the movie out the window, right? And then while copying the movie, like from the array to the array or something,
See if they could.
and it beat it, right? Like
Yeah.
before it hit the ground, like the file copied. And then they're like, "Oh, look, we'll run defrag. Oh, look at how quick it went." And I was just
Remember
like,
back in the day when a lot of people didn't know things about SSDs.
now, Josh, the reason you might be mixing those two in your head is because when those guys were showing off with that video, that was the podcast after that got popular is when I took 4 X25Ms and had them in a RAID, and while I was doing the podcast, I was pulling 200,000 IOPS from those 4 to prove the point that the native, like the motherboard controller, scales way better on IOPS than all that stuff those guys connected, and they were only getting like 60 or 80 or maybe 100,000 IOPS. So I was like, yeah, you guys got like 40 SSDs or whatever, or 20 hooked up, but
Losers.
I used 4 of the crappier, like older ones and got faster because, you know. Anyway.
Jeremy, anything interesting about this Scythe Ninja 4 other than its name?
It's a cool
Well,
name.
it'll be Maury's new love.
Uh-oh.
This
it's
thing
ginormous.
How big is it?
has 4 discrete sections to it. It's hard to see from that shot, but if you look at we don't have the overhead shot, but it's quartered. So that's why there looks like there's so many heat sinks, because there's
a lot of
heat
heat
pipes.
pipes
There
going
are
through
a dozen of them, 3 of each going to a separate quarter of them.
Oh, let me click through here and see what I can find that other
I don't
picture. Go
see
ahead.
I don't see why the number of quarters makes that much more
Yeah, keep scrolling down.
surface area.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
There you
This
go.
one? Yeah.
It's not a huge amount. It's certainly a very unique design.
Looks
There's
like a
no way
shirt.
you're going to fit a fan in between those.
No.
But it
And I
provides
can't really
turbulence
read
to
the weight
airflow.
to be able to tell you exactly how much this sucker is going to weigh, but I can guarantee it ain't going to be light.
But it's got a ninja star on top.
Oh, it does.
So, I mean,
It's-
why do you even care what the airflow was like, Josh?
Yeah.
Don't be silly. But, oh, sorry, there it is, 900 grams. So it's not going to be
900 G's.
as obscene as you might expect, but
It's a kilogram,
It's-
basically.
it's going to be nice because, as they sort of point out, for a 65-watt TDP CPU, this will probably handle it passively.
65
might not
watt fanless.
warranty it,
That's
but-
pretty nice.
Yeah.
I would think it would. And you can always slap on the fan, probably put a second one on the back if you get an adapter, and you probably keep things pretty darn cool with this thing.
Jeremy, would you consider it a positive to have to buy a large case to passively cool a 60 watt processor? Like you have to have you can't get one of those thin like mini ITX. You got to go like a micro ATX case to fit some heatsink like this in there. But if you
Yeah.
could do it passively,
When
is
are
that
we
a
gonna-
benefit?
When are we going to see that spinning heatsink?
They said this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Computex, I think.
They said it was
They
going to be
said-
this year. Yeah, Computex.
They promised you one of those.
Because I want to ride spinners. Ride spinners.
See me rolling.
But no, you slap this on that
They do hate me.
ECX Z97 PK in the middle of that giant case with the angular cutout, assuming you can fit the motherboard with a nice balance.
Sure.
Why would you not build that system? That would be unique, I guess.
Interesting stuff. Scythe. Plus, they have a cool name, and it's called the Ninja. It's really hard to go wrong with that.
Yeah.
All right, picks of the week, everybody. Here we go. My pick of the week is actually a pick of the week. I think I've made this pick before after we did the review
You might have,
of the Dell XPS 13, but this time I'm picking it again
because you spending your cash monies.
validly because I spent my own money to order one. So I'd used this. I've used several other Broadwell-based laptops. I have several other from Lenovo and other guys in house now, and I was kind of waiting to kind of see, how do they stack
what
up
was
at
out
this
there,
point? Like,
yeah.
what does the X1 Carbon look like? What does the XPS 13 look like? What does the Lenovo, the Yoga 3 Pro look like? Like, how do all these compare, and which one do I actually want to buy? Because I'm on an Ivy Bridge notebook now that upsets me in several
old.
ways now. So it's like, okay, now I'm going to spend actual of my own money on it, and I decided to buy a Dell XPS 13. Now, I did buy, the starts at $899. I bought the $999 configuration that has 8 gigs of memory instead of 4 gigs of memory,
Smart.
1080p screen,
Okay.
the matte finish, non-touch screen, because it extends battery life
That's probably
dramatically.
exactly what I would end up ordering too.
And it comes with a 128 gig SSD, but because we have access to SSDs here, I'm just going to throw in one of the MSATAs that we have in the office. So
M.2 SATA.
M.2 SATA, correct, not
what's in
M.2 PCIe on this one. Although maybe we should try an M.2 PCIe just to see if it works.
You think it has the lanes connected?
I don't know that.
It
I mean,
might.
you could do that, right?
could try.
So
Only one way to find out.
we'll give that a shot. So I just, I felt like, okay,
Hey, out of that entire CES group where we had hundreds of vendors,
yeah.
that was the thing that was the most interesting that we had seen, other than maybe that pet tracker.
I will say that when we were walking around, what digital experiences that we were at,
Yeah.
That's where you saw it the first time. I
yeah,
think.
it's almost impossible for me to walk around that show and see something and go, wow,
Yeah.
like be excited about it.
But you were.
Because really what
Because
I'm
Dell
doing,
had 2 products that you went, wow.
they had 2
Look
of
at
them. And usually,
Actually, and they were there at that event. I don't think they're usually there,
No,
are
I think
they?
Dell's usually there, but they're usually showing off Inspiron. I don't.
Yeah,
know
like
if
it's
the
nothing
case,
interesting, right?
But
Like,
that's usually how I feel about everything at that event because it's the last thing of the day and I'm tired and I'm walking around and I'm like,
Yeah.
God, there's so many things for me to look at. I can't possibly look at all of this. I'm just going to ignore everything, eat a hors d'oeuvre, have a beer, and I'm going to leave. But I just happened to walk by. Somebody was holding up the XPS 13 and I noticed the bezel around it.
or the lack of
Bezel around it. I was like, this is really impressive. So hopefully in the not too distant future, I'll be sitting here with one of those instead.
instead of
The year
that
2000.
boat anchor.
The year 2000.
I will say, like, I flew to London and back. I could have really used a laptop that had good battery. Like
You brought 3.
I brought 3 laptops. But this laptop, to be fair, the X230, when I first bought it from Lenovo, had amazing battery life.
That's true.
But this 9-cell battery has been charged and discharged probably a million times.
Well, it's like what, 3 years old, 2 years old?
It's almost 3 years old.
Yeah.
I think I got it in June. It'll
That's
be 3 years in
basically
June.
you're down to like 50% of the life left on your.
and it shows.
Yeah.
Right. And it's other things as well and whatever. So it was time to move on. 3 years is two years is usually where I upgrade laptops. 3 years was a stretch. But I tell you what I'm going to miss. I'm already actually, now that I think about it, I'm very sad. I didn't think about it
keyboard?
before. The keyboard, yes, I will definitely miss the keyboard, but I have like 4 of these Lenovo chargers.
Oh yeah.
Right? So I've got one at the house all the time, one at the office all the time. Actually, one at one station, one at this station all the time, and then one in my backpack all the time. Right? So I always have it with me, and I'm not going to have that with the Dell. So it does make me a little sad.
All right.
But anyway, moving on.
And your storage upgrade might well work because today on the Inquirer they were talking about a guy down in Mexico drilled a hole in his Surface 3,
How you
And
boys like Mexico?
installed a terabyte SATA drive into it because hey, the connector was there. So if there's an M2,
He
hey,
drilled a hole in it.
literally
access the
drilled
M.2
a hole
slot.
through
The
it.
screen is bonded on the Surface Pro 3. You can't take it apart without breaking the screen, unless you
Yeah,
go
I fix it,
cut a hole in
hated
the
it,
back.
and it also cracks, which is just awesome.
Drilling
Jeremy, what's your
straight
pick?
through- Yeah.
So, you want a BB-8? You can get a BB-8. All you got to do is do a reverse Caesarian on a Sphero. The guy took a Sphero. I don't know if you remember them. They were a little gadget toy from 2 Christmases ago. It's
Yep.
a remote-controlled ball that
We saw
runs
a
around.
massive one at QuakeCon.
Josh got in it.
I
So-
rolled around like a gerbil. I
This
liked
guy
it.
wrote a project on how to very carefully open one up with hacksaw, insert a
yep,
neodymium
hacksaw.
magnet, put it back together again, make yourself a nice little top, click the show all steps, view all steps,
Okay.
make your own little top, attach another neodymium magnet in there with some felt so it gets a nice, relatively frictionless movement across the top of the Sphero, and damn it, you've got yourself a wee little BB-8.
All you need is access to a CNC machine and or a 3D printer.
Well,
And a hacksaw and vise, but
Well,
you
yeah.
know.
I
and a
feel
little
like
bit
we
of
could do
artistic
that.
talent if you want it to actually look as good as this guy's did. But hey, weekend project, why the hell not?
And for
And he was
Ryan,
afraid to do it with the Sphero too because he hasn't torn one apart and they're a little bit expensive now. But hey, if someone wants to take up the challenge,
And for Ryan, Sphero is making this for this holiday.
Yeah, I got that because I've already signed up for letting me know about the pre-order part of it. Yeah.
Well,
you don't have to wait.
What fun is just buying one?
I'm looking at the Surface Pro 3 with the hole cut on the bottom. By the way,
Yeah. Pretty good, huh?
he did it impressively. He was able to somehow
Yeah.
cut the hole without getting metal shards all over the inside of.
That sounds impossible.
He machined
Plasma
it thin
torch.
enough to where it was basically paper thin, and then he just like pried and kind of peeled the aluminum or the metal. Like he basically made a flip top can lid thing out of it. Ugh.
Oh, it's impressive.
Yeah.
That's
But he did get a terabyte into his Surface Pro 3 that was only came with 256 gig.
Buy like a USB drive.
no, that's boring.
Josh, what's your pick? What do you got for us?
Something surprising
I hope
came
it's,
out
not, I
this
hope it's not a
Monday.
racing game. Oh my
What?
god, don't be another racing game.
Oh, it's dirt.
Yeah, it is.
Is it
Yeah.
dirt?
Dirt Rally.
Dirt Rally. I
Dirt
had
Rally,
a feeling.
baby.
I saw that come out, and I'm like, I bet that's Josh's pick of the week.
It sure is.
Is it really that good?
You know what? I bought it, and yeah, it's a very different dirt experience than what we've seen like with Dirt 2 and Dirt 3. Dirt 2 and Dirt 3, one of the biggest things that people didn't like about it was that it was pretty arcadey. And that's true. There's a lot of Drift-a-Low crap and Gymkhana and stuff that people just didn't really enjoy. They wanted the rally experience.
They want the real stuff.
Yeah, and so they, I guess this would be the Ego 3.5 engine. It's not quite their next generation 4.0, but there's improvements. But they built this from the ground up to be a better simulation. It's still in early access, so there's 3 areas, 36 stages, something like 17 cars. And so it's not a complete game, but they're adding every month. And the best part about that, you pay the $31 now, and you get all the additions until they release the game fully for free. So you don't have to, say, hey, here's another $3, here's another $4. No, they're wanting early access guys to help them, design this along. They're adding content each month until it's released in full. And so far I think it's well worth the price. It's a lot more challenging. It feels more accurate. I'm running around in a 1960s mini car, and it handles like crap.
Mini Cooper.
And so you have to really pay attention to what you're doing, and shifts are incredibly important, and you got to know when to brake and when to accelerate. It
sounds like rally.
It really is. As close as I'm going to get with my $31.
Hey, did you know the Steam controller has its own page now? Like it's an actual product on Steam now.
Wow.
Release date available November.
That's a render.
What? Well, yeah, it's animating it on the screen.
So were all those screenshots from Dirt Rally.
Well, okay.
Yeah, it's a render. It's like a game promo video.
Jeez.
Freaking.
You try steering with a rendered controller.
It is more difficult. Just use a Kinect. Alan,
And yes, I use a steering wheel and not a handheld controller because these racing games dumb down handheld controllers because you just don't have the degrees of freedom that a full wheel has, and so it auto drives for you when you've got a handheld controller.
Thank you. Anyway, Alan, what's your pick?
So I want to be able to find stuff faster.
Okay.
Files
Google.
and stuff.
Google.com.
No. Google doesn't work on my local storage. Right.
Wasn't there a time where that was a thing?
The appliance?
Is that what that is?
I don't think that was just to index all the files on your NAS.
I thought there was a thing that you could. Somebody
that
in the
was
chat
the
room
appliance.
remind me. Wasn't there something you could install
If you
on your
kept everything on
computer?
Google Drive.
Oh, that thing. I think they depreciated that other thing, the Google search engine thing.
Yeah, wasn't there something like you can install on your computer? Okay, never mind. Anyway, go ahead.
This is back when Microsoft Search was like a big deal too, and everything. And
Remember when Microsoft was going to have an SQL-based file system?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
moving on. What does your
Seattle,
pick have to do with
WinFS. Yeah. Okay, so this is a tool, a free piece of software. You install it. It installs like a service thing that runs in the background. Puts a little icon next to your clock. You double click on the icon, gives you a little search box there. It's a wheeled search. It's like instantaneous. Like as you're typing each letter, like the results are dwindling down, right? It initially shows you everything that's in the index. And the cool thing about this is the idea is just to find your files, but it's the way that it does it, right? It's able to index NTFS partitions that are local to you almost instantly. So we have over 1 million files on the file server here. And before the podcast, I put this tool on there, and the first time it ran, it took 8 seconds to index over 1 million files that totaled 7 terabytes or whatnot.
So how can it do that and Windows itself be really bad at it?
Because it is reading the indexes directly off the partition. It's bypassing Windows.
It's reading the work that Windows already did?
No, it's reading the index alone. Like when you do a search in Windows, I don't know why it does this, but it looks at a whole bunch of other stuff while it's doing the search, right?
Your emails will come up.
It does not just go, all right, where's the master file table? Here's the master index of root. Where's the indexes that come off of that? Okay.
There's got to be a reason for that.
Well, because this is only looking for file names.
You can't search inside of files.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Still, that's
Yeah.
very handy.
So it's
in
able
many
to
cases.
build the index extremely fast if it's an NTFS drive, right? Even if it's like a network share,
What if you have 50,000 small files?
well, this would actually
That would work fine?
that would work
Okay,
fine.
cool.
This would find them just fine.
That's good.
Yeah. If you're trying to copy them across a network, that's going to be slow, but this, you can find them really fast, right?
Yeah.
So when
It's,
you want to find out your GPU testing files,
Maybe you did.
Yeah,
Maybe you want to find
Maybe you did.
that one text file with the metadata in it.
Yeah. So,
Can this look inside zip files, Alan?
no. No. So other cool stuff that this thing does is, it can search like multiple drives. If you're one of those people that has a bunch of external USB drives, and all your random stuff is like connected to like 6 different drives to your system or something,
Yeah.
and, which I know a few people that do that still, this would just index all of them.
And did you say it could do network shares?
It does, but it can't search those immediately, right? It has to search those the long way.
It has to be local
right?
for it to search immediately.
But it does keep its own index, right? So you can set it to do like I think the default is 3 a.m. It'll scan that network share, right? So when hopefully nobody's trying to actually use your network.
So
is
you
when
would
it'll
get
do it.
instant results in that case, but there's a chance it could be outdated.
There's a chance it could be
if
outdated. Yeah,
Okay.
it tries to keep an eye on it and see if something changed, but that's only so good, right?
Right.
But all in all, it's like extremely fast, right? I mean, you're talking like over 1 million files, and you're just like every time you hit a letter, the list changes of the results, right? So
right.
it's not like Windows search is a totally different proposition. You ever try to do like search my whole
It's
computer
like a
for something?
JavaScript like filter search.
It's like searching on Google.
It is.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
is
yeah.
basically, except it's local to you, so it's even faster than that.
And this is
actually.
what is this Void Tools? Is
Void Tools is a company that makes it. The name of the program is Everything.
everything search engine.
Yeah.
Probably really easy to find inside a
It's
search engine.
kind of hard. You might want to.
What's the URL?
Voidtools.com, I believe.
Voidtools.com it is.
Yep, voidtools.com. Yeah, I mean that name is kind of weird.
Sure, whatever.
Like, it makes their support page look a little interesting because they tell you how to install everything and how to use everything.
Installing everything, using everything.
Yeah.
Command line options for everything.
Yes, uninstalling everything.
I don't want to do
use
that.
all the things.
I don't want to uninstall everything.
Yeah. So the name's a little weird,
no.
but it's just
From the control panel, open programs and features. Right click everything.
yes, just right click everything.
No, don't do that, Mom.
What's
No.
wrong with you? Right click everything. Just do it.
You said uninstall
I hope
everything.
you need admin privileges to install this. I don't want that support call.
Everything.exe/uninstall. Like that's
What could possibly go wrong?
that seems legitimate. No, that's no problem with that.
Yeah, but other than that, pretty cool tool.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That's going to wrap up this episode of the PC Perspective Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Again, if you want to watch the show, we record live. PCPer.com/live is the URL. We do that at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And if you want to sign up for those email newsletters that give you just updates, that's all we use it for is updates from when we're going to stream live, PCPer.com/subscribe. And now, if this is your first podcast, it's very disappointing for you. If you go to PCPer.com/podcast, you can find all the previous episodes that were way better than the one we did today. And all the forthcoming ones will be way better too. So if you go to that URL, you can subscribe to the RSS feed, you can download the files, you can listen to it through SoundCloud, you can find the YouTube videos.
Show notes.
Show notes are on there for all the stories we talked about today and all the hardware software picks that we went over as well. So lots of neat stuff there. So PCPer.com/podcast is the URL for that. And otherwise, I think we're ending now, and we will see you next week. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Bye.